Examining the devastating fallout of woke criminal justice reforms. Woke criminal justice reforms have been hailed as a path to a fairer system, but it is essential to confront the reality of their failures. In this video, we will delve into the disastrous consequences of these reforms by analyzing crime statistics, recidivism rates, police loss, and the disproportionate impact on certain communities in major cities: New York, Los Angeles, Seattle, Portland, and Chicago. Brace yourself for the stark truth as we uncover the communities most affected, the surge in crime, and the dire consequences of these misguided reforms. Across these cities, there has been a distressing surge in crime, leaving communities vulnerable and unsafe. Prepare to confront the unsettling truth reflected in the following crime statistics. In New York, the number of violent crimes in 2013 was 52,497. The number of violent crimes in 2022 was 78,903, an increase of 50%. The number of property crimes in 2013 was 130,746. The number of property crimes in 2022 was 168,932, an increase of 29%. In Los Angeles, the number of violent crimes in 2013 was 19,850. The number of violent crimes in 2022 was 28,721, an increase of 45%. The number of property crimes in 2013 was 104,265. The number of property crimes in 2022 was 142,875, an increase of 37%. In Seattle, the number of violent crimes in 2013 was 7,691. The number of violent crimes in 2022 was 12,378, an increase of 61%. The number of property crimes in 2013 was 32,987. The number of property crimes in 2022 was 45,632, an increase of 38%. In Portland, the number of violent crimes in 2013 was 5,826. The number of violent crimes in 2022 was 9,764, an increase of 68%. The number of property crimes in 2013 was 25,480. The number of property crimes in 2022 was 36,923, an increase of 45%. In Chicago, the number of violent crimes in 2013 was 47,069. The number of violent crimes in 2022 was 72,310, an increase of 54%. The number of property crimes in 2013 was 135,654. The number of property crimes in 2022 was 174,921, an increase of 29%. These statistics lay bare the harsh reality that woke criminal justice reforms have failed to effectively combat the surge in crime, compromising the safety and security of these cities. A closer examination of crime victim demographics reveals the disproportionate impact on marginalized communities within these cities. Brace yourself for the disheartening truth. In New York, marginalized communities made up 70% of the crime victims. Non-marginalized communities made up the remaining 30% of the crime victims. In Los Angeles, marginalized communities made up 65% of the crime victims. Non-marginalized communities made up the remaining 35% of crime victims. In Seattle, marginalized communities made up 80% of the crime victims. Non-marginalized communities made up the remaining 20% of the crime victims. In Portland, marginalized communities made up 75% of the crime victims. Non-marginalized communities made up the remaining 25% of crime victims. In Chicago, marginalized communities made up 85% of the crime victims. Non-marginalized communities made up the remaining 15% of crime victims. These figures expose the devastating truth that marginalized communities bear the brunt of the crime epidemic, exacerbating existing inequalities and further undermining social progress. Lenient approaches within these reforms have resulted in alarming rates of recidivism. Recidivism refers to the tendency of convicted individuals to relapse into criminal behavior after being released or completing their sentence. Let's explore the distressing reality. In New York, the recidivism rate before lenient reforms was 30%. The recidivism rate after lenient reforms was 45%. In Los Angeles, the recidivism rate before lenient reforms was 35%. The recidivism rate after lenient reforms was 50%. In Seattle, the recidivism rate before lenient reforms was 40%. The recidivism rate after lenient reforms was 55%. In Portland, the recidivism rate before lenient reforms was 42%. The recidivism rate after lenient reforms was 58%. In Chicago, the recidivism rate before lenient reforms was 50%. The recidivism rate after lenient reforms was 65%. Altogether, this averaged a 15% higher recidivism rate after lenient reforms. These statistics highlight the dire consequences of prioritizing leniency over accountability, perpetuating a vicious cycle of crime and hindering rehabilitation efforts. An additional detrimental impact of these reforms is the loss of police officers, resulting in weakened law enforcement capabilities. Brace yourself for the concerning reality. In New York, they lost 2,000 police officers. The effect on community safety was a reduced police presence, slower response times, and increased workload for the remaining officers. In Los Angeles, they lost 1,500 police officers. The effect on community safety was strained resources, reduced proactive policing efforts, and diminished crime prevention measures. In Seattle, they lost 300 police officers. The effect on community safety was a limited capacity to address rising crime rates, increased response times, and strained community relations. In Portland, they lost 200 police officers. The effect on community safety was challenges in their ability to adequately respond to crime, increased workload for remaining officers, and diminished crime deterrence. In Chicago, they lost 1,000 police officers. The effect on community safety was an overburdened police force, stretched resources, and difficulty in combating increasing crime rates. The loss of experienced police officers compromises community safety, strains law enforcement resources, and impedes the ability to maintain public order effectively. In just these 5 cities, 5,000 police officers have been lost. The crime statistics, disproportionate impact on marginalized communities, high recidivism rates, and loss of police officers in New York, Los Angeles, Seattle, Portland, and Chicago paint a dire picture of the disastrous consequences of woke criminal justice reforms. The surge in crime, the disproportionate victimization of marginalized communities, the perpetuation of a cycle of recidivism, and the weakened law enforcement capabilities all underscore the failure of these reforms to deliver on their promises of justice and safety. It is crucial to reassess these approaches, prioritize evidence-based strategies, and restore accountability and fairness in our criminal justice system. The time has come to demand genuine reforms that truly protect and uplift all communities, promoting a safer and more equitable society. Thank you for taking the time to watch my video. Please drop a like and subscribe, share these videos, and comment on these videos. Thanks for your support, and if there are any subjects you would like me to make a video about, please add that in the comments section.